right, so let's do a little chat here. I see. So I'm here with Rachel Pelela and Doc Yam, and I see we have Moksha on, and we have Alok listening in.
Oh, awesome.
And so just a little impromptu chat. I mean, I wasn't planning anything, but I saw you guys were in the audio channel. So a little chat of opportunity. Also trying to grab Doc and Rachel before they depart Santa Fe.
Alok, how are you, buddy?
Yeah, he might be in the other room, so we can.
Okay.
He's just on the audio channel.
He's just listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I thought we could chat a little bit and just hang out. So
Nice.
yeah, what's been on your mind lately? I know we were talking about 2027. We were talking about projectors.
You know, the thing that I'm noticing with Rachel is that as a quad right, she has a lot of projector qualities. And I have a lot of quad right qualities. And the way we talk about that is my absorbing aura.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always absorbing everything. And as a quad right, she's doing the same thing.
Yeah, she's a manifesting generator and you're a projector. But yeah, I think a variable is operating at the level of the awareness, beneath the line, where it's kind of, you have a penetrating, focused aura, but then you also do absorb deeply. But then, for instance, I guess there's just the levels of the mechanics, but then also of the awareness. And because the projector has so much to do with the attention, it is, in a way, this interesting crossover type where it's a type whose mechanic has to do with awareness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's something that my good friend Mike often talks about, Michael Steenbeck-Litvin, where he'll say the projector clarifies through the use of their attention, and that they continue to pay attention to something. And even the right variable, they just continue to be present with it until it clarifies itself or becomes more what it actually is. Like if something's confused or muddled or tangled, it will become untangled through the projector midwifing it into its clarity. Its clarity. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Right. So I watched Rachel do that. I think you'd have to speak to that, but from your quad right perspective, it seems rather an openness to what you're absorbing until it's clear you need to move this way or that way.
Yeah, I look for signs, kind of. It's like the least resistant way, like I kind of map things out a little bit and then see what kind of places give, where something is not resistant towards me, and then kind of follow that for a while. And then if that gets resistant, then do something else, potentially. Maybe that's manifesting generator too.
Well, to Jonah's point about the awareness and the clarification with your awareness, as you bring your awareness to what it is you're feeling, then you become aware of that resistance, and you go, oh no, move! It's getting clearer about where I need to go.
Sure.
Yeah, it's so different from the left variable awareness, where I'm always trying to discern through a pattern or kind of pattern matching, what do I need to pay attention to or not? And you kind of fill up the space with your awareness and permeate it.
That's so good.
And then through that permeation, then notice the path of least resistance of how to resolve or move around something to not get stuck there.
Right.
So I've noticed that.
That's such a good point you're making about the how you fill up the space. I really like how you said that.
Yeah, there's something about the right variable that permeates, or that it's not just pattern matching of like being left variable. I can sit and listen to something and I'm kind of tuning out, and then maybe something makes me tune in. But the right variable can't afford to do that. They're just there, and they're just taking it all in, right? They're not discriminating, they're not discerning ahead of time what they've taken in. They're taking it all in and they're getting to some essence from it. They're pulling the essence out of it. There's an interesting keynote for the fifth tone, which is kind of on the personality side, which is judgment. And it's easy to think of splenic judgment, channel judgment. That's not what it is. Ra describes the right variable judgment as the crystallized essence of experience, so that they have an experience and that they are able to crystallize something or distill something out of that, to abstract some essence out of that experience, which they can then retain as a kernel of that experience. But it's very different than the left variable, which is kind of taking from that experience, categorizing it, and putting it in relationship to other experiences and trying to look for the pattern within it, and so on. It's not at all trying to find what's unique in that experience. And so the right variable is, my example is kind of, they're better suited for actually taking something that the left variable can't take from something, where if I studied with Ra in person, or I listened to a lot of Ra lectures, or I read a lot of Ra, it doesn't really make a lot of difference to me, because I'm, as a very left variable person, extracting from that the logical patterns. But the right variable person who actually studied with Ra would be getting a greater benefit than simply reading Ra. Listening, I think, is the second best thing. I do see that a lot of right variable people can absorb through osmosis by leaving audio on and multitasking. I mean, something I loved about how you explained the right variable, Rachel, when we were first meeting, really clarified a lot to me, which is that if you're doing something focused, you'll actually be less efficient and less effective and make more mistakes, and it'll be a really laborious task. So that if you are listening to a Ra lecture and doing something else, that you're actually taking it in more deeply. You're getting, it's like this osmosis factor.
Totally. Rachel would say to me, if I focus her at the wrong moment, it's painful. It's really painful for her to go from that really broad spectrum of taking things in and just being with it, to look at that. And it pulls her right out of that place. And I do it in my body. I've done martial arts all my life. And for a long time, I talked about what I call body-to-body transmission. So my variables on the, my independent variables are right. So my body is very receptive to learning without focus. So if my teacher is trying to show me a technique, a technology like a wrist lock or something, and he's going through all of this very point-by-point thing, I'm like, look, just do it to me. Just throw me, sweep me,
just
whatever you're doing, just do it. And once they do that, I've got it, right? That's what I called, before human design, that's what I called body-to-body transmission, right? Now I understand it as a right variable absorbing everything through my body, everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right past my mind, it just goes in.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That you're able to take in.
That's why I think it's important for right variables to also be kind of included in that projector, needing to have the experiences, needing to be around the upper echelon of minds to be, getting the higher frequencies of, knowledge too.
You're only as good as what's being pulled out of you.
Right, and what you're around.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's so true.
It is, right. And that's a good point about, similar to the projector being sort of the one that takes in the conditioning of the others the most, and so it becomes most important for them to have a healthy diet of healthy auras.
Right, correct.
Right. Or I have to be very aware of who's conditioning me. There's a healthy conditioning for me.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are people that will really wreck me. And I've come to see that very clearly. And Rachel and I have been watching what we pull out of each other. It's been very fascinating for both of us to go, watched this process of me pulling through her quad right and her pulling out of my projector ness, my absorption of everything. And it's really led us to explore. I'm very fascinated with witness consciousness. And I think part of it has come from, death experiences that I've had recently. And but we begin to look at the milieu, if you will, that allows witness consciousness to come forward. And to be clear, I'm making a distinction between my passenger awareness, my design, my body, and being able to watch it from passenger consciousness, and a third place that's active that sees them both and has nothing to do with either of them.
You're witnessing the passenger experiencing
the design.
Yeah. Oh, my word.
Yes. So, I feel like this is an important part of where we're going with design, because it is a system of awakening after all. And what are we awakening to then? What is that? I call it my eternal nature, but it's witness consciousness. It's that uses the passenger and the body to have this experience, right? Ultimately, for me, I can only speak from my place. I'm just beginning to explore this. And find ways. As I talked to Kamud, we would talk about nine-centered conversation, which ultimately is where this is going. I wanted to bring it around because Rachel and I talk about our nine-centered life, right? and how to spend relatively more of our awareness time in witness consciousness instead of in my not self mind or, in my mind.
Yeah. And as much as we understand in human design that we can't decide to mentally change something, my personal experience of my sacral awakening was something that happened about 9 months into my human design experiment, where I literally, for the first time in my life, felt what it was to completely only have mind appear in reaction. And even then, as a sort of a background, it's almost as if the background became the foreground and the foreground became the background. Yeah. And it lasted a little over a week. And I can still find myself back in that state. But it was something like a mild trance. And one of the interesting things I felt during that state was just the tremendous physiological changes that occurred. Yes. And it was actually like I was in the parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't have the words for it, but spontaneous healing, spontaneous relaxation. I mean, sleeping incredibly well, and just experiencing the physiological in a very different way. It was like all of the previous interpretations of the coded messages from the body were being interpreted differently now. And I was no longer, I was plugged into the same thing, but there was no fear. There was no anxiety. There was no, there was a really great quote someone in our discussion group said, I'm not sure who it was from, but it's that knowledge is simply belief without fear. And that's what it felt like, was that at that point I didn't have the belief with the fear associated that it would go away, or that it wouldn't be true, or that it wouldn't be real, or all of the ways the mind can second guess. Instead, I just had direct knowledge. And that knowing was very comfortable, to be in. So, of course, like anything, you get used to it, and it doesn't necessarily last forever in that sense. You can't just be in the experience. There has to be a moment of reflection. And so after about a week, I began to reflect on it. And then once you're reflecting, the experience is already over.
Right.
But that was sort of my induction into human design. And I still notice that feeling sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I noticed when we begin to talk about that, I don't know if you're perceiving it, but I'm feeling more of an ease in my body at this moment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You start to relax about it and kind of...
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of what I come to understand is this nine-centered conversation that happens where the conversation comes from another place. It's not from my mind. It seems to arise from nowhere. It's the best way I can put it. Is it?
Well, it's almost like channeling or something, or a mild trance state where you just see yourself talking and, you are the apparatus for something else to come through. Yeah.
Well put. Definitely. So, yeah, that's what was on our mind.
Yeah. Well, and I love that we're in this 3.5 year lead up to 2027, and this idea you were saying yesterday that the projector frequency replaces the existing cross of planning frequency.
Yes.
Post 2027. So it's not simply that we're moving from one. I mean, yeah, obviously there will be these locks and keys of the sleeping phoenix, and we're moving into and the Maya also is the internalization theme, and we're moving out of the cross of planning and penetration. But but just this idea that the projector frequency itself is the frequency that is going to be necessary or even just felt.
That.
Yeah.
I think you would appreciate it's
wonderful.
Because it's a raw quote.
Oh, I love
that's where I got that is from
nice phone background. I just saw Doc's phone background, and was that a real skull? I mean, it was absolutely a pretty terrifying close up of a skull. It's also beautifully carved. I see it's a carved skull. It's like
it's bone.
It's a bone carved, but it's like a human skull with a grin with this amazing.
Yeah, since I've been dancing with death, I love anything that. Breaks the contract, so to speak. I mean, our minds make up all this stuff about death, and it really doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Anyway, and that's a whole nother topic, I believe. Where did my?
1 second.
Oh, I know where it is. Okay. Give me a second.
Yeah.
And I'll find it for you. Okay?
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Oh, I know where it was. Okay. Yeah, it's in my... So we're looking for a raw quote, and the quote I'm looking for has to do with the background frequency of the
Right. It was the change of the background frequency.
Yeah, and how the projectors are replacing that background frequency. And I can't find it now, but once I find it, I'll send it to you.
Please do, and I'll share that. But
it actually was on IHDS. They send out these newsletters.
Oh yeah, I get those.
Yeah, and it was on there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a really speaking to projector ascendancy, and they were selling a projector something, right? So that's where it is. And I thought I had been feeling for quite some time this press to, this pull or pressure to begin guiding. Part of this, I know for me, was your invitation to come to the conference.
Oh, thank you.
It pulled me off the roof, really.
Thank you.
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, I just came off the roof and fell into my cross big time.
Wow.
It was an amazing experience, Jonah. I'm just so grateful.
I'm so grateful you came, and everyone was just saying that the talks
it was awesome. And in that real sense that projectors need to support each other and help each other to understand how to guide and what is it that we're guiding, and have all the tools for that. And then when I read that quote from Ra, it was like, oh, that's what I was feeling. Is that we have this responsibility to show up in this particular part of the change, right?
I found one quote, this is not exactly it probably, but this is from Projector Empowerment, and Ra was saying, Projector, ignorance is the most dangerous thing. What you cannot grasp intellectually can always threaten you because your life is determined by your intellectual capabilities. So, again, this is the connection of the projector to awareness and what recognition is really about, and how when we recognize a pattern in our life looping, then it no longer loops because the simple act of recognizing it has already changed our trajectory. I mean, we have no choice, but we do have a chance. And this is where I often get in disagreements with Mark Germain, who has a very fatalist perspective of no choice, where he says, well, you have no choice whether you recognize something or not. I actually say, well, that may be true. I can't just snap my fingers and decide to recognize something, but I can strive to recognize it, or I can, basically I can learn or not. And so it's going to be, ultimately it is out of my hands whether I learn, it is out of my hands whether I recognize. But if I am able to recognize, and it is often an effort of imagination and a honing of intellectual skill to recognize something, then that very act of recognition does change where I'm headed without me deciding to go where I'm headed. It's simply that the change has occurred because once you recognize something, it's never the same. It's like quantum waveform collapse. Like there's something that keeps going one way, and then you recognize what it really is, and then it can never go that way again. It's permanently changed. And so I see recognition as more than just specific to projectors. I see that as very much about the awakening process. I mean, what is human design if not learning to recognize certain things that you didn't have words for before, learning to recognize and understand certain aspects of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that it is something to recognize and to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, that's why what Ross says, it's, your life is determined by your capacity to recognize. It's determined by your depth. You're not providing the other with manifesting or generating. What you're providing them with is an intellectual skill set, a recognition skill set that you can trade for those resources that they have. That's the deal. The deal is you have something that is consciousness oriented that you're here to contribute on this plane. That's why you're always in trouble the moment you're into the form stuff, the moment you're into your own life and its problems, without seeing what your real potential is. So it is this amazing potential of awareness.
Wow.
That really the projector exemplifies.
And to circle back, it's the same with the quad right. Like we have to, we're a resource to serve a greater good to then be compensated back. Kind of similar to the projector, in a weird way.
Yeah, no, it is that the right variable consciousness is emerging in tandem with the projector ascending to its place in the hierarchy, And right variable consciousness is sort of exemplary of the nine-centered being in the same way that the projector is exemplary of what it is to be awake in this stage of evolution of human consciousness. I mean, if we really see the big picture as the development of self-reflected consciousness, we see these different crucial key points where the greatest development occurred through certain thresholds that were passed. And I was just saying yesterday how I like to say we're at the second great meridian of time, the first being 0 AD, which might seem Christian focused, but it's not. It's simply that 0, is this sort of first meridian that all time has kind of adapted, around, just even by custom, and that it does mark a very a threshold time, which was the emergence of the Christian ideal of nonviolent competition, because it used to be if you won in a competition, you would be afraid because then the stronger one could kill you, without reprisal and so on. And it was basically saying this gives people permission to actually compete without fear of reprisal, right? So nonviolent competition, or competition at the intellectual plane, competition for jobs, competition through the mind, competition through the capacities that aren't necessarily just physical capacities. So that was a really key moment in the development of human consciousness, which is not to denigrate or reject any of the amazing moments in India and in China and in other places where there were these satori moments in human consciousness. Obviously, the time of Buddha, obviously, there were these incredible times, the time of Lao Tzu and the time of Confucius and so on. But in any case, for however it shook out, 0 became this midpoint, this meridian of time. Now we're in 2023, everything is relative to that. But I say we're at a second great meridian now because we're right at that point of maximum population. And it'll be interesting when we start seeing the news stories about the population diminishing. We haven't yet. I'll give it a couple more years. But, we're right there. It's already diminishing in Japan. It's already diminishing in some places.
Yes.
So,
well, you bring up a very interesting thing, this time idea, because our design principle has there is no time in the body. This whole idea of waiting, teaching a class and waiting, because it's such a basic to what we do, or how we do this human design process, and yet nobody really talks about, well, what is it? How does Jonah do that, and how is that different than how Rachel does it and how Doc does it? And when it really gets down to it, waiting in the mind is painful as shit. Waiting in the body, it's nothing. The body it doesn't know that. Time is a construct of the human mind. I think it's actually one of what I've been playing with, and I'm really interested to hear your spin on this, is I think it's one of our most basic conditioning factors, and we never look at it. It's there in the background all the time, and we never bring it forward to go, how is this really affecting, how is this conditioning me? So like, for example, I'm doing a lot of root, I have an open root, and I've been a fake manifesting generator for most of my life. And so undoing all of the pressure in my root to hurry up and get something done is related to time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if there wasn't a time factor, what would my body do with that? That's what I've been playing with.
Right. That is actually the mind's experience of the time, kind of like that Einstein point that, putting your hand on a hot fire can seem like an eternity. Spending an afternoon with a, lovely person can seem like a blink of an eye.
Yes.
And so this relativism of time, I think that's very profound. And there are philosophy of time people. I love Bergson, who really described the development. He described the development of the mind, and he actually famously debated with Einstein and lost the debate, I guess. But I really like Bergson here. But his idea is that the development of the human mind, he is a human exceptionalist in the same way we are with human design, where we see that the 9-centered form is different from the 7-centered form, is different from the 5-centered form, and so on. And people who don't have that knowledge often say, we're really just no different than dogs and cats. And so, that's a very common prevailing idea. Right. But he was a human exceptionalist, just as we are in human design, that said, no, the human is different from all of the other mammals. It's not really mammal. We need a new name for it, what our classification is, because we are different. And so as a human exceptionalist, he asked, what is different? And he found commonalities with dogs and cats and other red-blooded animals, but warm-blooded animals rather. But he didn't see us as the same, because he said that there was basically a key difference, which is that a deer, a dog, a cat, a cow, any of these things, they have a small gap, or what he called a zone of indetermination, into which they are able to suspend habitual reaction, suspend instinct, and appeal to past experience. But it's so small that they only have a minimal capacity to do this, whereas humans, he said, for the human, time has surged inward and created a space of interiority that has reversed the scenario where mammals are purely, we could say, determined by their environment, but humans determine our environment. That the involution of time surging into the brain and creating an interior space we call mind, and effectively allowing us to pause time and to suspend what's going on and create kind of a stop to the movement of life, has then changed it so we are no longer determined by the exterior time that determines us materially. Because when we interiorize time, we are able to determine the external materially. We're able to build cities, we're able to build bridges, and we're able to, so it's this like switcheroo between time and space, where the animal has time outside of it and space inside of it, and we switch that and we take time inside, which allows us to manipulate space outside.
Could you even say the Maya?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
That we're no longer it's merely determined by the Maya, we determine it through the involution of time.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also a curse. It's a blessing and a curse, because we've gained this amazing ability to pause time. But even going back to Lao Tzu, I know that Ra would point out that Lao Tzu had this amazing foresight of seeing into the future where the mind would become the enemy. And at that point in the development of consciousness, the mind was being developed thousands of years ago, and it was the greatest tool. It was the way that the human, the 7-centered being, could ascend to the top of the food chain, only to later become this enemy that traps us in the prison of frozen time, that keeps us separate from the movement of life.
Wow. That was really fun, John.
Right?
That was
Isn't that an
fun,
interesting? Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it for sure.
Great.
Well, there's a question from Christine. Aren't we? And she says she ordered a customized pop socket of her body graph. Very cool. Aren't we nearing the end of time as a 3D construct, as the Mayans predicted? Supposedly, that's why time has been so wonky, shorter or longer than it seems like it should. Well, I mean, the shorter and the longer is the mind's apprehension of time. And as you're saying, the body doesn't even have time in that sense. The body has movement. It's like time is a mental construct and movement is what's real. And they're different.
Right.
They're different, right?
This whole quantum biology process that's starting to emerge is really very simply based in putting your feet on the ground and getting sunlight in your eyes within an hour after you wake. Yeah, and this is the body's clock.
Yeah.
See, it's not 9 o'clock, you get up and put your feet on the ground and get sunlight. No, an hour after your body awakes, then you do this. And what it does is it changes the actual light changes our why they're calling it quantum biology is it changes the hormonal balance within the body itself. And as the spectrum of light changes through the day, it keeps moving our biology to a different place. This is without a clock.
Yeah.
This is completely us returning to interaction with our environment, which kind of speaks to what you were talking about, how the outside was in and the inside is out.
Yeah.
Now we're reaching back out to go, wait a minute, we're off. Mm-hmm. All the blue light that comes from our devices, they're saying, you're upsetting your design principles balance by having light after the sun goes down.
Yeah, it messes up our circadian rhythms.
Exactly, and much more. Yeah. It disrupts testosterone, all kinds of things. So, I think human design for me is really beautiful that way because it's about the design principle living the life, not the mind. Mm-hmm. And the mind moves us around by time. The body doesn't do that.
It's so true. Yeah.
And so this idea, who just asked about the time?
That was Christine was asking about the mind.
So yeah. I think personally that the reason things are changing, right, is what you were saying, Jonah, about this meridian that's coming up. And how we're shifting our awareness within that.
Absolutely. That we're reaching a key point in the development of consciousness where things are, it's like this peak. People talked about peak oil or peak this or peak that. Peak population, that's something that we're reaching. And but I can definitely see the connection, or I do. I'll usually get up in the morning and go walk outside barefoot and feel the dirt, and it feels so good in the earth. And I will sometimes do, stretching and things like that. But yeah, being connected to the natural cycles, that's something that it's also surprising. It was surprising to me learning in human design that landscape comes after hardscape. That we're moving out of the hardscape in the sense that hardscape is what's determined by the mind, and the seven-centered creature, it had a challenge, which was to hone its mind so that the mind could be this perfect left variable. All seven-centered creatures were quad left. We were from there was no rightness. So everything was quad left. All of our human history up until a couple hundred years ago was about the development of the mind so that we could outsmart the saber-toothed tiger, so that we could, so we could outsmart nature. Exactly. Right. So that we could outsmart nature itself. And we did. And now
we're going back.
We're moving to landscape. Yeah. We're moving.
Gotta go back there.
And it's kind of like we were never, there's this book by Bruno Latour called We Were Never Modern, which is like a kind of just like a funny idea. Like people are like, we're so modern. He's like, we were never modern. But in a way, we were never landscape. Like since the beginning of the seven-centered form, that beginning was the beginning of the involution of time that allowed us to create hardscapes. Caves were the first hardscapes. It allowed us to create clearings in the brush. It allowed us to dominate nature, to manipulate nature, to fend against nature, to
build kitchens.
Yeah, to build kitchens, to build markets, to scheme against nature. Right. All of these things.
External markets.
And now that we're moving into this new era, it's like the trajectory is towards the landscape, towards the first time. We like to imagine that there was some Edenic time before hardscape, but there really wasn't. Before hardscape was just Neanderthal. That was the Eden. But we were never modern. We were never landscape. Like we are actually now finally we have our destiny, which is to become truly what we thought we used to be, which is to enter into that landscape environment. So
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love. There's a deep point in base theory, which is when you look at the bases, the base of mind is the farthest from the base of movement. And so there's a base mat, which is the square. And, you have mind on one side and diagonally across is movement. Now you have space in the middle, which is one way for the mind to get to movement is the personality, which is the kind of waking up of the personality through presence. Then another way is through the body. And another way is through the design. And we often say the body and design, interchangeably, but when you get to base theory, the body would be like hunger, sex drive, sleep drive, thirst, all the different bodily things. And then the design would be really the dream world and the imaginal world. When you close your eyes, what world exists from the world of the unconscious. And they are connected, but they're actually also opposite on the base mat, and they're connected through the personality, which is interesting as well. So there are just some interesting nuances there. But I just like that for the mind to get in touch with movement, which is what it's ultimately needing to do, it has to go through some other means. The mind has no direct access to movement. So there's a question from Christine, weren't the Neanderthals and prior all right variable? Yeah, absolutely. They were, but it was a different kind of right variable because they were 5-centered. So it's kind of like saying maybe dogs and cats are quad right. We don't really know, I guess. But I mean, they're 5-centered, right? They're the 5-centered form.
It's like a splenic instinct, but quad right. Like I kind of think of it like that.
Right. It was the rightmost evolution of the spleen or something, right? But it wasn't yet the solar plexus.
Like that's how they could move. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a flow.
So, right. They moved in a flow, or as the French philosopher Bataille said, animals are in the world like water in water, by which he meant non-human animals. The humans are not in the world like water in water. The mind is, stopping the flow of the water or something like that. So, but yeah, to see that, animals are of the world in a way that humans are not. And this, what we've been talking about with the reversal of the inside and the outside that occurs through language and through the development of interiority. Because we do speak in language, not just in code, other mammals speak in code where they might deceive, they might give the wrong code. They might say, I'm dead, and really they're just sleeping. Or they might say, I'm not here, and really they are there. They're hiding, they're coding their communication. They still communicate, but they don't have the complexity of language.